Do you know what it takes to be a Christian? Do you understand the cost of discipleship? That's what we're discussing this week on the Fourth Magi. So in this week's gospel, Jesus asks us to consider what it means to be a follower of his. Because, the people that he's with, they are convinced he's going to be an earthly king, an earthly Messiah that's going to reign over a kingdom. And so Jesus wants to make it real clear, no, I'm on my way to torture and death. And that's the Messiah that you're following right now. And if you're going to follow me, well, then that's what awaits you, because any disciple should be willing to do what the master does. So Jesus was willing to give his life for his teaching, and so we should follow in his footsteps and be willing to pay the price to give our lives for his teaching. And we know plenty of martyrs, plenty of men and women throughout the world, throughout history, who have given their lives because of Christians. It's happening now. Just Google Christians in Nigeria or the Sudan, and you'll have plenty of stories about how Christians are paying the cost of discipleship with their lives. Sometimes I think that we should go back to adults choosing to be Christians and following Jesus. We baptize babies, we send them off to school, they don't know anything. They learn and then they forget and then they leave the faith. They have 16 years of Catholic education and they're like, hit the road. So there is something to be said about that. At some point in a person's life, they have to think, I'm a disciple of Jesus. Am I willing to pay the price? Am I willing to do what it takes? We love the Marines. In my family, my grandfather was a Marine. My father was in the Air Force. One brother was in the Navy. Another brother was in the Army. But my grandfather was a jarhead. And so he thought he was better than everybody because he was his branch of the service. And we've all watched films of Paris Island and what the Marines have gone through, but the Army has made many sacrifices as well. And so is the Air Force. But the Coast Guard, not to leave out the Coast Guard. But we understand, what they have to go through when they go to boot camp. When they sign that paper in the recruiter's office, they know they're going to go through a boot camp. They're going to have to serve somewhere. They're going to endure hardship. They're going to put their lives on the line for this country. If they don't, well, quite frankly, they don't realize that, then they're stupid. Because if you are going to join a branch of the service to defend our country, and you don't realize that at some point you may have to give your life to defend this country, well, then you're stupid. You might be looking for a good deal or education or something, but if you don't realize that's the price you're paying, well, then you're stupid. And Jesus says the same thing. When he tells a story about a person who wants to construct a building and never calculates the cost, and they get halfway done and they're like, oh, out of money. They're stupid. They look foolish because they didn't have what it took. They didn't pay attention to what it was going to cost them to build that building. And Jesus is saying to you and to me, do we realize the cost of following him? Because sometimes, if you're really following Jesus, you might have to choose between family members. You know what? I don't agree with what you're doing morally. I don't support that. And make a choice. I choose Jesus. You might have to do that with your spouse. You might have to do that with your job, your school, your friends, your country. And that's what Jesus is saying. Do we understand the cost of discipleship, and are we willing to pay the price? Good luck, God bless, and have a wonderful week.